Okay, hello everybody. It's November November 17th, 2025. I'm recording a different video. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go, but I figure hell, maybe I'll even do some edits. Why not? If I have to edit it, maybe I will. But I'm basically giving an update. Oh boy. I'm giving an update on my pursuits of philosophy and literature and reading, and in particular, basically dealing with Friedrich Nietzsche. And I'm at the point right now where I've I don't know if it's fair to say that I've finished reading this one, The Gay Science, because if you get to um, the appendix, the songs of Prince Vogelfree, I haven't read the appendix. It's not very long, and I have to admit, I also there's something in the beginning where there's the whole what is this? Some songs or poems or something. A prelude in German rhymes. Um, and I didn't read all of those, but that I think that serves as a kind of an introduction and appendix. And I guess I could say that I've read The Gay Science now. And what happened was I started reading this, and then rather than just focus on this one book and read it start to finish, I ended up going back to the beginning, reading The Birth of Tragedy, which was the first one that he did. And a lot of people, like, I was listening, I'm a fan of the Weird Studies podcast, and those guys often talk about how it's not very good. And so it's kind of like, I had this kind of funny thing where it's like, I was just curious, basically, right? It's like, people are, like, I was recommended by certain people to read this one because this is basically, if you're going to read one, apparently this is the one to read. And then people are always saying that this one is like not what, like, there's something about, like, people are, don't read this one, it sucks, but it's like I had to read this one. And then just because I was curious, basically. And then I had to go and also read the Deleuze book on Nietzsche. Um, and so I've read all of these. I've 100%ed these three books, and I've just started reading Thus Spake Zarathustra, but I don't even know if I'm really that keen on it right now, or that I'm figured maybe this is a good time to try to record my reaction to Nietzsche, trying to read Nietzsche, trying to deal with Nietzsche. Um, and basically, first of all, there's the obstacle that I've had with Nietzsche from the beginning is that admittedly, whatever, I was in a place in my life where I was having some mental health problems and kind of confused, and basically didn't I procrastinated. I decided not to. I tried to go for more wholesome things and try to read Nietzsche, um, and one that was a basic issue around this I found was wanting to there's a philosopher also that I read, Byung-Chul Han, who talks about the compulsion of self-production, right? And that there's a certain kind of I'd gone through some sort of thing where I had quit my job and I was in a certain moment of uncertainty of what to do with my life and all this kind of stuff. And there's some kind of thing about the problem about philosophy in general is that it seems to be I mean, when you're young and you're concerned with what to do for a career or how to support yourself or how to create a self-image for yourself, trying to grasp toward, you don't want to use, like, it seems like a bad idea, basically, or you're conditioned to associate the move towards somebody like Nietzsche as a red flag, basically, right? And so in the more recent times when I've gotten into the exploring more of this sort of philosophy stuff, appears to be that a common obstacle in that we live in a society where we're very much conditioned by all these rather than getting into the problems and like trying to like consider, okay, so if this has been, if Nietzsche has made a bad reputation for himself to the extent that he is considered to be a red flag or what for whatever reason, then what's important is that you just know that that red flag is there. You don't question what that red flag is there for. You just kind of know that it's a red flag and that you just stay away from it and then don't think about it. And so like the problem is that once you actually read Nietzsche is to overcome that obstacle, get on the other side of it, and then say, oh, okay, I see why the red flag is. Then I have to be like, you know what, okay, there could be a certain degree of misunderstanding, but there could also be very legitimate criticisms or reasons why he has a bad reputation. And there's something about which is interesting about the getting to the end of the gay science. There's the kind of note that he ends off on is one about simultaneously he's saying that he's like worrying about being misunderstood by people. Like maybe people are going to read this and completely misunderstand me. But then he's also saying that like, well, maybe as a writer, maybe I don't want to be understood all the time. And so he's kind of playing this game where he's like maybe I should make myself, maybe like, or he's always, this is what also interesting about Nietzsche to me. One of the main things is that a lot in the whole media environment right now, when it comes to philosophy in general, there's this issue about making philosophy accessible, or that your job is to be there as like a middleman where there's some thing that going on and that it's obscured and complicated and stuff like that, and you're supposed to translate it to your audience to make it more understandable. And Nietzsche is saying, like, why don't you make them work for it? Why what I'm doing here? Why do you think that it needs to be something that's made accessible to just the average Joe Schmo? And why would you want to do that in the first place, right? And so the whole thing is that what I find Nietzsche is kind of funny because it's like for the whole project of like the whole, you know, what you're doing on what YouTube purports, like if I'm making a YouTube video and like what the basic, there's a certain unquestioned prior that I think everybody making YouTube content about philosophy just unconsciously agrees that, well, you could just read the book, or but you're watching my video, and so my job is to try to translate something to the audience to make it more easy to understand. And Nietzsche is just kind of like, well, if they don't get it, or you don't, like maybe it's okay, maybe I can do something that you guys don't understand, and that if you want to read all sorts of bullshit into me and put up all these red flags, well, whatever, maybe it's for the best that you guys don't get it, right? He also says that there's this kind of thing that if, like, I'm not even sure if like I would, or there's a lot going on there. So is it just one thing that you just take issue with and you disagree with, or is it the whole gist of the project? But there's some kind of thing where Nietzsche says that like the morality and being beyond good and evil, and being there's obviously something going on in the political movement where I would say conservatives are really uptight about moral relativism. They want, and conservatives seem to promote a absolute moral order. I mean, I don't know if it's just necessarily a conservative issue, but there is moral relativism upsets people. And Nietzsche talking about some project being beyond uh, morality, he was saying that if the whole premise of that is really offensive to you, and you to the point where you would disagree with that, and instead say, you know, I believe there's a goddamn good reasons that we have morality, then Nietzsche says all the better. That just proves that my project it validates my project. So that your whole argument against me is actually creating, what if I wasn't here to provoke you with how important it is to be a good moral person. What if I wasn't here to play to scare you with like what if we got rid of all of our morality? Oh no, I bet we better not let that happen and uphold moral values. Then that, if you want to take that angle, then that you've just justified my whole project, basically, right? But then, meanwhile, if you are courageous enough to come with me on some other journey, then you do that, and either way you go, it works for him, basically, which is kind of like a weird way to leave off, I guess. But it's like, this is kind of the weird appeal of Nietzsche, is that even if you are disagreeing with Nietzsche, then Nietzsche says, good for you for disagreeing with me, right? And so there's like there's this funny, you can be into reading Nietzsche, and then from this point of view where you don't have to like preserve all the things that, like, there's all these problems with Nietzsche, and that even if you set yourself against the things that you don't like about Nietzsche, by Nietzsche's own rationale that he states, good for you for not agreeing with me, for not taking everything that I'm saying as some stupid dogma that you're supposed to believe as a religion. Like, that you don't have to say what I'm saying. You can use your own intelligence to not be a sucker that just buys into my bullshit and think for yourself. Congratulations, basically, right? So that I think is like, that's more about the appeal of Nietzsche than anything that you could say like, oh, this is a red flag, you know. If you read Nietzsche, you're waving this red flag around saying that I support all these terrible, deplorable views and all this kind of stuff like that. And one of the most obvious things, I guess, is the whole association with the Nazis, which apparently is completely misfounded, because if you were to really break that down, for one thing, basically Hitler did like I think the basic, I do take an issue with Nietzsche, because regardless of the positive, the things that I would agree with or the things that I like about it, there is enough going on there that even if the Nazis that Hitler did take, that it would be like taking the bits that you like, editing those out and appropriating them for your own purposes. And it's not that, if you look at the whole picture of what Nietzsche is saying, it's absurd, because for one thing, Nietzsche is basically he's criticizing European culture. He's criticizing the Germans. When he's making an attack on morality, he's not making an attack on, he's specifically targeting a European morality in the context of a multicultural society, and saying that we as Europeans have certain values and standards, and that if you compare that with other cultures, maybe they might have a different set of values, right? And so that, how do we know that our values are really superior? How do we know that we're making all the right judgments? Maybe we've just got our heads up our asses, and that a lot of the time when he's talking about a kind of like the whole premise of a inherent superiority of one line of ancestry over the another, like, I mean, he criticizes the Germans for drinking too much beer, basically, right? He's saying that, like, if there's going to be some sort of like Ubermensch, you're not going to find it in like a beer hall, basically. That's not the place you're going to look for. Like, intelligence is like a bunch of like, rowdy Germans singing folk songs about their ancestors. It's kind of stupid, right? So like, the point about Nietzsche is that it's not apparently Nietzsche was Polish. Nietzsche believed himself to be Polish, so that, and Nietzsche and the Germans tried to basically censor that, edit the parts of the philosophy that they liked, and then say that he was a German and that his great mind was like the example of the highest pinnacles of German thought, when he really is this Polish guy who thought the Germans drank too much beer and were kind of stupid, basically, right? So, and like the whole point about Nietzsche is that or what am I trying to say? The problem, though, is that Nietzsche's criticisms of, like, you have to think about the era that he was alive, the whole the nine he wrote was writing books leading up to the era called the gay 90s, where there's this time of sort of like affluence of the Victorian era, or the going into the before you get into World War I and World War II, right? And part of the problem about this is that there a lot of what the thing I don't really agree with about Nietzsche here is that he's criticizes Western, I guess you say European Western civilization for having gone soft, basically, right? And that basically they need a big disruption, a big shock, a big shakeup to 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 whip everybody back into shape or whatever. And there's something about this which this element I feel was kind of to me that seems to exemplify the thing that the Nazis picked up from him as a way to they're going to be show everybody how they're stronger and more superior and dominate and all this kind of stuff. And there's that basic trend in Nietzsche that puts. The thing is, it's not what's interesting about this. It's not just about the whole war thing or whatever, but there's a certain kind of like there's a way that what I find problematic about all this is not just Nietzsche as a guy who represents. There's also like there's some kind of issue with getting into. I'd also just like to address first of all as well that I do an astrology channel, and at some point in time, I've noticed there's some sort of issue when it comes to the rift between my interest in wanting to do astrology and my interest in wanting to study philosophy, but it's not really. It's not like the two are antithetical to each other. And in fact, one of the great astrologers that's defined modern astrology is this guy Rick Tarnas, who's written a book all about the Enlightenment and he does a lot about Nietzsche's theories of like Apollo and Dionysus, right? And there's this whole one of the things that influenced me to go back and read The Birth of Tragedy is that when Rick Tarnas is talking about these modern planets like Pluto, a lot of what Rick Tarnas is drawing from is the Dionysus archetype, right? And there's something about that Dionysus archetype which has to do with the drunken crowd, the beer hall, the sort of intoxicated, nonsensical populism of our era, which I think there's something about this which is it's kind of topical, maybe, right? There's some the thing about Dionysus is that Dionysus is also represents a kind of like a burnout character in a way, right? The idea that it's not just that it's not instead of being clear and sober headed, you're drunk and reveling in the crowd or something like that. But at some point in time, there's a certain good sense that the sober minded says there's all this stuff that you would do when you were drunk and reveling that if you're in your right mind you wouldn't do, and then that mistake just goes to show the rule, and so that you can say like, oh well, I guess I learned my lesson or whatever, right? But there's some kind of thing that you have some potential energy, like the way that you've got like a ball at the top of a hill has potential energy, and then it rolls down the hill and it expends that force or whatever. There's some kind of basic force at play that in the Dionysian archetype expends itself, and that there's some kind of thing that happened with the Nazis where the Nazis basically expended that energy, and now, well, the problem is that there seems to be the risk factor of basically more of that energy, which we should know better, but apparently we don't, and apparently we need to. All these people are hurtling towards some kind of disaster or some kind of problem, that we should know better, but they need to just do it anyways because they have, like, this is kind of, it's like the sin, the human folly, but there's some kind of, like, Nietzsche's basically trying to say is that there's some sort of, like, even it's like even knowing that it's going to go wrong it creates a more fertile ground. But the problem is that what that fertile ground created was the technological acceleration, basically, unfortunately. And this is basically what makes the gay science, I think, so interesting, because it's a ways that you can, it's not just about the I mean, I take issue with that whole dominance. We need to, everybody's too soft, and we need to, like, harden them up and see who the real tough guys are. Like, it sort of comes across that way for me. And it's not, and the thing is, it's not just, if you are like, there's this, like, move of trying to, like, of Nietzsche as a red flag. Like, you don't want to associate with Nietzsche or whatever and wave the red flag of Nietzsche around. But the problem is not that whole thing, but rather, where has Nietzsche's philosophy shaped and created the modern world that we live in, and that, to the point where the red flag is invisible and it's just been normalized, right? And one of the things that is I think, most insidious about this is, now I'm gonna have to admit, I have a personal, I'm gonna just, like, be careful about this, because I don't want to be misunderstood. That I'm not entirely against health and wellness and all this kind of stuff, but I think that in this whole sort of, there's a certain populist wellness movement, but not just, I'm not talking just about, like, Maha, Make America Healthy Again, that stuff, but even if you go back to, like, Olivia Newton-John, 1980s, or, like, sweating to the oldies, like this whole kind of, like, aerobics, workout, gym fitness culture, or, like, people who are really into jogging and, like, self-improvement through fitness. And there's something about this whole thing which is, like, I think, on one hand, if it's not, I'm not having a conversation about that kind of stuff. It's like to say I don't want to split it into a bifurcation of being either for fitness, for wellness, or being anti-fitness or anti-wellness, because I don't think it does. Like, to me, it, like, there's some kind of redundancy that obviously it's good to be in good health. It's good to be in good shape. It's good to do things. It's good to have habits that are going to help you to be healthy. That, like, and so that in itself is kind of a redundant point to argue. And so if there's people there's an industry around helping people to do that, whether this is selling people running shoes or treadmills or, like, dietary supplements, or you name it, there's a whole industry around it, right? There's also the point, it's not just the whole industry, but obviously there's a lot of what happens on social media, or there's a whole culture around self-improvement through physical health and like, workout and bodybuilding and all this kind of stuff. And I have to say is that maybe I'm just a little bit biased in the sense that I've never really been drawn to like gym, like the weight room culture. Like it's just like I'm all for a healthy lifestyle and being in shape and having fitness and all this kind of stuff, but maybe it's just my personal taste that I don't really feel like spending all my time in a gym or something. It's just not like, if I have my choice for what I'm going to do with my time, it wouldn't be to go there, right? That's just not what I choose to do, okay? There's something about Nietzsche, about he's criticizing the culture of the Victorian era in which he was alive and active, of that you had these noble people that would have this very like dressed up appearance of fancy clothes. But there's this hilariously bizarre aphorism in there, which is like the X-ray goggles, the X-ray specs. Like, what if you just like, well, what if you just had X-ray goggles and you're at one of these like hoity-toity like elite like rich people party, or the aristocrats, and you were like looking at them through your X-ray specs, and you're looking at their naked bodies, and these people are probably overweight, or like, they don't exercise, or they're just kind of, and these are the elite, the best of our society, or something like that. What a joke, right? And he's like, so he's like, why is it that like you've got some farmer, you got some guy who's working hard on the farm all the day, and he's got big muscles, and he does all the work, and you're just some lazy person who's appropriating his wealth, and would dress up in some fancy clothes to hide the fact that you're fat and you wouldn't look good in a bikini. But the thing is really funny about this is that you had a certain kind of like cultural social standard, and then Nietzsche says, this is just fucked up. We need to have a big like fucking war and blow everything up, and then after that, we'll reset the program, and then we'll have some hot girls in bikinis, and and everything will be like, it's funny because there's like this thing about how like Gang of Four, the band Gang of Four, kind of plays on this, where it's like, see the girl in the TV dressed in a bikini, she doesn't think so, but she's dressed for the H-bomb. And it's like there's this kind of like also this weird joke about like Bikini Atoll, about how they did nuclear testing on this like Bikini Island that they get the name from bikini for. So you've got this like new era where the old age of like Victorian prudishness around sex and is gone, and now we're gonna have all the girls showing off their bikinis, all the guys with big muscles on the beach, and we're gonna go surfing in the USA, baby. Like it's like Beach Boys, right? It's just like there's something about how there's something about how the whole kitschy 1950s thing, which is obviously like, it's like this horror almost, right? Because it's like, I don't think that's like, do you really think that's what Nietzsche had in mind? As like, Nietzsche's like, this Victorian era sucks, we're gonna do it way better, we're gonna have you're surfing in the USA, show all the muscle studs on the beach, and it's just like, it's like kind of like, it's like this is something like how that's such a like, if you think about this sort of like this California like bleach blonde surfer thing, and then you think about like, what is it like to be like a Polish guy hanging out with Wagner, right? And that there's this kind of thing about the culture, like Nietzsche's just like hanging out at the pinnacles of artistic society in Germany, of like the upper echelon of class, and he's like, fuck these guys, we need to get some like blonde bimbos with bikinis and party and like beach. It's like I don't know, maybe that's just like me being a West Coast guy, and my like, it's like the dramatic irony of like Nietzsche doesn't know what the 1950s, like what the 40s and 50s are gonna be like, and the 60s, and he's just, it's like this whole like, oh, Nietzsche, if only, but he's not, he's got a certain visionary thing though, where Nietzsche's just like, fuck off, Wagner. You think you're hot shit, but I'm writing my book not for you, but for the future generations. There's this kind of, this is what was really weird about this, is that you get the sense that Nietzsche is just like totally disconnected himself from he's become a hermit. He even makes references to the hermit at the end of it. He's hermited himself away. He's rejected the culture around him, and he's saying that we're going to fuck all this shit up, and we're going to make a new society, and we're going to have like muscle bound like workout bros and beach bikini girls, and it's going to be great. Like, I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating, but this is like, it's hilarious because it feels like you've got a pinnacle of like a certain kind of class, and then it's just this fall into just the trashiest commonplace of what we take for granted as like American culture. And like there's also this kind of like nihilism in it, right? There's this kind of nihilism of like, if this whole thing where you're like, I work hard, and then I'm gonna go to the bar, and then rather than having, rather than impressing somebody about like being cultured or whatever, or having good taste, I'm just gonna flex my muscles, and then that's the culture we live in. We just live in like, whoever's got big muscles to flex, and you're a hard worker, and you're an Uber. Like there's this. Like, the funny thing about it is like, I think there's like some kind of misconception. I don't even know if I'm getting the Nietzschean Ubermensch thing right, but he does literally have this criticism of that, like we need to, like, we've gone soft, and that we need a big war, and then in the aftermath we're gonna have, everybody's gonna be attractive and have muscles, and it's like is this really what you guys want to promote as your I don't know. I'm a little bit, I think it's funny, but I'm not like it. I don't really necessarily think I want to like wave the flag of identifying as a Nietzschean dude just based on like that kind of stuff. And like, I think that's so I'm not really this is what I take issue with about Nietzsche, basically. um so, but the whole point though is that he does this criticism of the whole Christian, the meek shall inherit the earth. It's better to be gentle. It's better to be caring. And he's instead saying that, like, what if we're become too humane and too conscientious with how we treat others, and we're just soft weaklings, and we just need to be like these, like and just like dominate people. It's like, what? No, like. So I don't know. I'm kind of there's other things though that I do like about him, in that like you would think though that there's something about this, that being tough and having muscles and not being soft and all this kind of stuff is like to show off that you have value because of how utilitarian you are, right? How practical, but then Nietzsche's like, no, not utilitarianism sucks. We don't want to like promote utilitarian. So I feel like our modern society has accepted that part, the workout bro, like show off on the beach, exhibitionist, like rather than having a sophisticated taste and culture, you're just going to be like whoever is like the beach, the muscly beach Chad is the alpha male. Like the thing, we've got that. But the thing is, then Nietzsche is like, there's this like, it doesn't want it to be just utilitarianism, right? He doesn't, that if it's all for the purpose of like, we're going to create all these guys to then pump them out to like, what, be good policemen, to be good, to keep law and order in society, to keep like, there's something about it that it's not just all about that. There's also about I don't know. There's this is what's also really bizarre about it, is that if you think about what happened after World War II, or that the fact that World War I and World War II were this massive time of technological acceleration, and then in the aftermath, it's bizarre because for me, when if you stick with this whole thing about gym culture and workout culture, it's like, before, people had to have big muscles because the jobs that they did actually demanded them to have the muscles to do them. And there are, to be fair, if you work in construction or whatever, there are probably certain jobs where you do need to have, but for most people, the point is that if you were just to go off what you were doing in your daily life, it's not going to be enough to give you those huge muscles. So you have to spend tons and tons and tons and tons of, like, the other thing that's funny is like the whole culture of like I don't know, like Joe Rogan and like the manosphere and the bodybuilding thing is like, if you think about what the medium is, you're sitting down, you're for hours and hours talking with your friends on a microphone. This is something that you don't need to be using your body very much for it at all. Hell, you know what? If you were typing on a keyboard, you'd be using your body more, right? Like there's something about like what I'm doing now. It's a very like just me sitting here speaking. I'm not writing. I'm not using a pencil. I'm not, binding books together or anything like that and mailing them out. It's a very, you're literally like, so there's this whole thing where it's like, we had this huge technological development, and it's allowed hyper communication with very and basically this, you have this whole infrastructure where the most dominant hyper communicators are basically, you have to be you offer this product that has no physical engagement, physical involvement at all, and then the whole industry around it is then like, you have to compensate for it. You have to be like, oh, well, now that we're just going to sit here for 3 hours talking to our bros on microphones, we're going to have to compensate for that. Because if I just really gave into this, all my muscles would if you don't use your muscles every day, they atrophy and they go away. You don't want to have either a bunch of weaklings or a bunch of fat blob people that are just talking heads. So the whole thing is like, everybody's concerned. We just created this abundance of this thing. And now we have to be like, so, okay, we're going to have to put all our energy into like doing the stuff that is completely foreign to the thing that we're making, that's the product you're selling, right? So it's like an offset, right? Like we're gonna basically like, we're gonna build empires off the stuff that makes people fat and lazy, but then as they get fat and lazy, we're gonna be like, oh, fatty, time to work out, it's time to start doing push-ups, it's time to do this, and it's it's like, this is like it's like the dumbest fucking shit. Like I can't, like, if only you could, I don't know. I think it's kind of stupid, basically, right? And it's sort of like, we've got this, like, so instead of having like instead of using the hyper communication to promote like a sophisticated culture, it's like, we kind of like, it kind of, I don't know. I have a certain obstacle where I'm kind of like, I'm caught between this thing, because I feel like if I start like, I don't know. I did a course on Shakespeare. I don't know if I really want to get into the Wagner stuff. I'm reading some Nietzsche. I'm kind of like at this level of like sophistication of culture but then it feels like it sort of, the more people do this, you're like, oh, I become self-conscious that all I do is sit around and read books, and then there's this sort of like, people start the Rilke thing. You must change your life. I need to get jacked so that like people are going to build a statue for me where you can see my chiseled abs. And then after the apocalypse, people will be like, oh, well, at least we knew that this guy was buff. At least we knew that he could get ripped, get jacked, work out, and like have muscles. And we don't know about him because his statue's crumbling, but at least we know he was he was a workout bro, right? We don't know the meaning, but we at least know this guy was, like this. And this is kind of like what I'm kind of irritated about it. Like, I'm not, or I don't want to like jump on, or like there's a certain trend of this way where I think it was like, there's this guy, Peter Sloterdijk, who I don't really like because he's always seems to be pushing in that direction, where he said that like, life in itself resembles more of like a decathlon than a beach party. And I don't know, man. I'm just kind of, maybe I'm just not the decathlon. I'm not like I'm not going to be like swimming and doing marathon. Like this whole kind of attitude where everybody's just like, oh shit, I just spent 3 hours like sitting on a webcam doing it. I got to fucking do a marathon. I got to work out. Whoa! And it's like, this is, or like the whole point of it, there's some kind of blind spot I find in this. Like my dad was one of these guys who'd be like punching the punching bag, riding an exercise bike, doing all this kind of stuff. And my dad like crashed into a truck and parked truck and broke his arm and had to like not work for a year, right? And it's like, there's something about this whole kind of like, then you get the payout from your insurance, and then you get like, but my dad's just like, stuck on the couch with this existential crisis. I gotta be productive. Oh my god, and it's like it's kind of like there's some kind of it's like you've got all this pressure on you to be like some other, like some old-fashioned idea of superiority that doesn't necessarily, like, having big muscles doesn't make you a better podcaster, right? It just relieves the anxiety that you're like you're like, oh no, I ate too many sweets, now I've got to do some push-ups to burn the calorie. It's like that kind of anxiety, like, and that's like, is this really your evolved, sophisticated society that we have all this we have all this abundance of resources, and this is how we're going to spend our time? We're going to have a bunch of insecure people that we're like, oh no, I have, like, or this is, I'm so, like, this like, instead of having like food scarcity, it's like, oh no, all our leftovers are rotting in the fridge. Oh no, we don't know, like I'm so stressed out because I have too much stuff, and if I eat it all, I'll be fat, and then people aren't gonna like me. And then if they see that I'm fat, they're gonna not like me. And then if I show that I read Nietzsche, they're not gonna like me. And I have to just make my image perfect so that everybody likes me, and I do everything right, and everybody, and it's like, that's. Like, that's what this is our highly evolved society. Like, thanks, thanks humanity. I guess it all paid off. I guess all that suffering, I guess all that chaos, I guess all this bad stuff paid off. We've got a bunch of people that are insecure, have to become fucking, like, like bikini babes and fucking like jack surfer dudes. It's like, and every second they spend doing something other than trying to reach some sort of physical superiority, they're like insecure and panicked, right? Like, and this is like as a constant state of nonstop anxiety that you have to just work hard and be busy and show off how virtuous you are all the time, right? And like, I think like there's this kind of thing where it's just like Nietzsche has shaped our culture enough that we've gotten rid of this is kind of old standard where instead of trying to show off your body, you might show off your fancy clothes and talk about the opera or something like that. Like, so we kind of got halfway there, but we didn't get this whole kind of thing where the meritocracy of being a hard worker or trying to impress everybody by how virtuous you are, right? Like, I think there's something kind of thing where there is a thread of there is some value of, like, I think the worst part about Nietzsche is the stuff that's become so of what we expect as normal from our society is Nietzschean already, and that's kind of the problem. And that maybe the shock that, like, we need to read Nietzsche and be like, oh my god, we gave in, we didn't resist Nietzsche, and like, we've integrated Nietzsche too much, basically, right? And so I think like the answer is to, like, we need to go back and like de-Nietzscheify ourselves and sort of rescue what was lost to that destructive process, right? We need to, like, it's like we've been in shock ever since World War I and World War II, and in like a haze of just, and thinking that we have to be like fucking Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys or something, and now we need to be like, okay, we don't, that's just some dumb, we don't have to use, we can create our own value system. Like, fucking Surfing USA doesn't have to be our image of paradise, right? And I think that is the promise of, perhaps, but it's a perilous journey to get there, perhaps, to question those basic values. Okay, thank you for watching.